Hi, I'm Trisha, and I'd like to share with you for a couple of moments the power of story. It was a couple of years ago, and it was a gray February day in the city of Boston. I was heading to a client meeting, and I got off the train and I was sort of shuffling along with all the other commuters into South Station. Now, everybody had on their gray and their black February coats and their gray, cranky February faces. And as I walked along, everybody's spirits just simply seemed to be low. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught some image of a bright picture of a bright color. And I turned to look. It was a huge poster. And it stood out because of the vibrancy of the colors and the details. And the message was really simple. In really large letters, the poster said, "You are here." And I looked around at my fellow commuters and thought, yes, we are. And the next line said, "But you don't have to be." And I thought, wow. Now this was a poster for a travel agency. So obviously they were talking about physically changing our location. But in so many ways, "you are here, but you don't have to be," can be used when we think about wanting to change a situation, wanting to change a perspective, maybe even wanting to change how we look at a particular thing that's going on in our work or personal lives. That's a quick example of how something, an everyday occurrence, can really be used to introduce a topic and to engage with an audience. So my question for you is, when you're in business meetings, when you're giving presentations, when you're part of networking conversations, are you simply reciting the facts, or are you telling a story? Because telling a compelling story is the way to communicate your message, get it across, and engage with your listener in a way that straightforward factual accounts simply can't do. So for a few moments, I want to share with you a couple of tips about thinking about how to increase your power as a storyteller. The first is, where do stories come from? Then a quick moment on, well, how do I find the right story? How do I know what's the right story to tell a particular audience or group? And the third point is, how do I really tap into my ability to tell a story? So let's start with the first one. Where do stories come from? Stories basically come from three areas. They come from your own experience, they come from the shared experience of others, and the third avenue is basically everywhere else. You don't have to look very far. Take a look at movies and music and social media to see stories at work. The interesting thing is that the most effective stories are often the ones that are the everyday, common things that have happened to you. For example, if I'm at a presentation and I hear someone talking about climbing Mount Everest, I'm impressed and I think about their perseverance and their drive and their motivation. But there's also that little part of me that knows I'm never going to climb Mount Everest. I applaud them for their efforts, but my identification with them goes only so far. On the other hand, when I go to a presentation and the speaker talks about a challenge, a tough decision, a risk that he or she took at work, and maybe even lessons learned over something that didn't really go the way it was supposed to, maybe even a failure. This is powerful. This is something that goes from the personal to the universal, and it's something that many, many people can connect to. The second point is, how do I pick the right story? There are so many. And the answer to that depends on three factors as well. The first is, you want to take a look at the context. Basically, what's going on, who's there, what's the event, is it a conference, is it a meeting, but what is the setting that you're thinking of sharing the story in? And then ask two questions. The first question is, does this story, does this example, this narrative, does it support my purpose? In other words, why am I telling this story? To inform, to persuade, to motivate, maybe even to entertain. And the second question, probably the most important question, is, will this example, will this story resonate with my audience? Will my audience see themselves in this experience? Will they connect with it? That emotional connection is really the key, so that we begin to see that our listeners not only hear what we say, hopefully understand it, but ideally are moved to act. The third point is something that I hear fairly often. People will say to me, but I'm not a storyteller. I don't know how to tell a good story. And I think that's so unfortunate that the world has become divided into those who can tell good stories and those who can't. I believe we all have a story to tell, and I think that when it's ours and when we're excited and animated about it, it makes for a good narrative. But check it out. The next time that you're in a group, it could be at work, at lunch, or maybe at some networking event, you're going to see someone speaking, and you're going to see that they have energy and that people around them are interested. Chances are pretty good that that speaker is telling some sort of a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and people are enjoying it. They are engaged. So that's it. So moving ahead, keep in mind that stories are everywhere. They are all around us. Also, think about a couple of questions to ask yourself when you determine which story should I select to tell this group. And finally, grow in confidence. We all have a story to tell, and we are our own best storytellers. Remember where I started a couple of moments ago. You are here, but you don't have to be. What will you do next to grow in confidence and to use stories, the power of story, to grow your career? After all, it's your story.